Hi, Hannah. Hi, Kendall. Welcome. Hi, Shazy. Shay, Celine. Hi, Laura. Hi, Catherine. So nice to have you all here. Go ahead and say hi in the chat. Welcome. We'll get started in a second. Yay. And maybe tell us, where are you? And like geographically, city, state, country, and where are you in your GRE process? Are you new? Are you deep into it? Are you somewhere in between? Cool. Oh, we have another Laura. Hi, Laura. Oh, Celine, you're so close. That's exciting. Oh, we got a couple LA folks. Nice. Cool. All right. A couple tests coming up relatively soon. Awesome. Cool. Chicago. Oh, a bunch of my friends are going to Chicago next weekend. Christine, welcome. Cool. Taking about a month. At the beginning. Awesome. This is great. If you're just coming in, I'm asking folks to let me know where are you and where are you in your GRE process. So both geographically, hello, Andrew, welcome. Geographically, where are you? And existentially, spiritually, emotionally, where are you in your GRE process in time? Cool. Oh, fun. You're in Nigeria. That's so cool. Must be really late at night for you. I'm so impressed you're here and awake. That's awesome. Hi, Rachel. Welcome. Hi, Javier. So good to have everyone here. So let me tell you a little bit about how this is going to work tonight. Cool. A few folks have just started. So I think we have a nice mix tonight of folks who are like at the ends of their timelines and folks who are near the beginnings of their timelines. And I'm going to try to do a session where I accommodate everybody's needs. So recently I've had at least relatively small free prep hours. Tonight's actually looking to be larger. And so I've been running these as free-form Q&A sessions. And I'll explain how that's going to work. So my hope is that no matter where you are in your process, I can answer your most urgent question or questions, and everyone can leave here with at least like one little nugget that will help them. I have a colleague who says he thinks a tutoring session is a success if he has helped that student get one more question right on the test. That could even be 1 point improvement in score. So maybe my hope is I can give everyone something here tonight that will help you get at least one more question correct when you take your official test. And the other big news in GRE land, of course, is always that there is going to be a shorter GRE coming. So if anyone has specific things they want to talk about with the test change that's happening in September, we can do that. Cool. I'm Kat. I've been teaching the GRE since 2015, and it is the career that I just never thought I would have. Never in my life thought, oh, I will teach the GRE for 8 years. My not so secret is that I don't like standardized tests, and I enjoy celebrating with all of you the day when no one has to do this stuff anymore. And that day will come, and I think not too distant future, but the day is not here soon enough for us. So in the meantime, I want to channel my innate dislike of standardized tests into helping other people defeat them as efficiently as possible so that you can be done and you can move on to the much more exciting things that you want to do. And I love working with people who are thinking about going back to school or in that process, because you are making choices to change your life in a positive way. And it's really cool to get to be a part of helping people change their lives in positive ways. That's really the best. So, yay. Hi, Suraj. Good to have you here. So we'll probably do some problems tonight. We'll see how it goes. We will do from the 5-pound book. So for folks who are new, if you are going to get one book, get the book ETS makes, the official guide. It's like a purple book. Get it from ETS. This has real retired GRE questions. And I heard a rumor that someone actually saw an official guide question on a recent official test. I can't say more, but study the official guide. It might really help you even more than you think. So great thing to get. If you're going to get 2 books, I would say get this one because it is literally more than 5 pounds. Every topic, multiple questions, organized by topic and by difficulty. So that's my brief study materials. If people who are new want to talk more about like study planning, study materials, study habits stuff, I love that. I would be very happy to have that conversation. So because there are only 13 of us, here's what I'm going to ask. I want to build what we do today around what you most need and want from this session. So my hope is that everyone can get something that is very targeted to them. And also in listening to me discuss other people's questions, hopefully you'll pick up some other stuff that will be useful. So you have one ask. It can be a topic, type of problem, issue, specific question, but something that you really think will help you in your GRE studies, whether you are about to take the test really soon or you are just beginning and this is all brand new. What is that question? There is a Q&A function in Zoom. If you are able to share that ask in the Q&A function, I would appreciate it because it'll help me keep organized so that I can make sure I do everything for everyone. If you have trouble with the Q&A function, you want to ask your question in the chat, that's not the end of the world. I'm going to give everyone a minute or two. Think about what's most important to you. Let me know. And then I will do my GRE magic and try to do this in an organized way. Ooh, Navpreet, it's good to see you again or have you here again. Navpreet, yes. Manhattan Prep is now offering short form GRE practice tests. So if you've purchased our practice test bundle, I think you might automatically get these as well. That's again outside my scope to commit to that, but we do have them. The ETS short form practice tests are not coming until September. I don't know when in September. Like, I don't know if that's September 1st or September, whatever. I'm on it. Believe me, like as soon as those things are out, I'll be taking one because I want to help all my students. All right, cool. Let me see if I can organize our theme. Oh, we have a lot of verbal questions today. Yes, love this. All right, so we are going to talk a lot about verbal. We're going to talk about essays. We're going to talk about the text completion, and I'll just lump them under vocab. We're going to talk about vocab questions. We are going to talk about reading, generally how to get better. And we will also talk specifically about inference. What counts as infer? How do we know? These are awesome. And then we also, let's see. Cool. That's what I got so far. If you have not yet asked me your question, you still have an opportunity to ask it, but I'm going to start answering some of these. I'm going to start with, is it better to wait until the 2-hour GRE to take? That is a great question. Should you wait for the short test? Whoever asked that, if you want to send just me a chat, like doesn't have to be public, but if you want to tell me anything more about your specific situation, like when you're applying, what type of programs, how long you've been studying, like some of this is going to depend a lot, I think, on the individual person. So feel free to tell me whatever you're comfortable telling me about your situation, and I can give you like a specific read on this. But I think like unless you are applying, unless you have been studying for a while and are aiming for, round 1 B schools, 1 MBA, probably the shorter test is good. I would say that my experience has mostly been, I've started seeing some of my long-term students have started taking the short form practice test, and I'm generally seeing people are doing a little better. on it because it is shorter. There are some other benefits to the short test. There is only one essay. So for anyone who's concerned about essays, this is really good. You will have to overall read less. So I think for anyone who is in a situation where they have added stress in reading, you did not do your primary or secondary education in English, or English is, one of many languages you speak and not your home language. You have a learning difference that makes reading, like anything, you've just always never really liked reading, or you feel like a slow reader. Any reason why reading is particularly stressful for you, I think the short test is particularly good because there's just not as much reading. And that's, to me, always, it's when I see fatigue, it's really in verbal that the fatigue is a big issue. So I think that those are some good reasons to aim for this test. And there's also no experimental section. And that's a great gift, right? Because you're very certain of everything being scored. You don't have that extra guesswork. So I think this is great for folks who maybe feel anxious when they deal with these tests, which I would say is the majority. Majority of people I work with, them kind of anxiety or trauma or bad experience with these things. These tests are terrible bullies. So all good reasons. Another good reason to wait for the short test is if you have extended time. If you have like 1.5 or 1.25 or 2.0 time, especially for students that I work with who have double time, like this is a game changer. The extended time test is already so long, like 6 hours, 8 hours across 2 days sometimes. So this short test is going to be, I think, just so much more humane an experience for anyone who has extended time or who is thinking about, if you're like, maybe I should have extended time, it's worth potentially pursuing. So that's my thoughts on why to wait for the test. All right, cool. I got a couple more excellent questions. We have a couple folks here tonight who are in their last 2 weeks. So I want to talk specifically about what you should do in the last 2 weeks. And then also I want to talk, I think what I'll try to do, I got a question about sort of like study practices. I'm going to try to weave my discussion of study habits into everything I say tonight. So as we go through this verbal stuff, we're going to have a very verbal focused class. I like it. As we go through this verbal stuff, I'm going to just constantly be trying to highlight study skills and study habits. And then if I have a little time at the end, I might back out and do a little bit more study stuff. So I think here's how I'm going to order our session. And that way, I'm going to start with the last 2 weeks, because some of you who are in your last 2 weeks, I feel like after I've said what I need to say to you, the right decision for you may be to drop out and go nap. So let me start with folks who are in their last 2 weeks. Then I want to talk about essays. So this will be number 1. This will be number 2. 3 will be vocab. 4 will be reading. And then again, if anyone who hasn't yet asked their question has a question, if you have little questions that come up, let me know and I will answer them as I go. All right. So let's start with what to do in the last 2 weeks. Oh, Suraj, I'm going to get to your question too. When we talk about reading, how to get better, like there were a few people who had questions in that realm, so I kind of lumped them together, but I will absolutely speak to like long-term building proficiency skill type stuff. The short answer is read a lot. For everything, read a lot. And I'll talk about that in more detail. All right, so cool. I got you. All right, so let's talk about the last 2 weeks. I have good news and bad news. I'm going to start with the bad news. The bad news is once you get to about 2 weeks from your test date, you know what you know. You are unlikely to acquire any major new knowledge or skill and be able to learn it well enough to deploy it effectively on the test in the last 2 weeks. 99% of people cannot cram effectively for this type of task. I say 99 because I've seen one person do it. I've had one student cram all their prep into 2 weeks, full-time studying, see a big jump in score, be great, be done. One. I have taught hundreds of students over 8 years. So yes, there is that person. But for most people, 2 weeks, this is when I tell everyone, this is your cutoff for learning new things. So if you have not, if you're like, oh, I never looked at probability, don't try to learn probability now. If you're like, oh, I feel behind in vocab, let me try to cram in 100 words I've never seen before. Do not do that. It's just not a good use of your time. And, at best, it accomplishes nothing. At worst, it makes you tired and stressed and run down and discouraged. And that is spirals into a bigger problem. So you know what you know. Good news is you can absolutely still have a really positive impact on your score in these last 2 weeks. Here's the timeline that I generally teach. 2 weeks out, take a practice test. Make this your dress rehearsal. Same time of day. If you're taking it at home, use the erasable surface. If you're taking it at a test center, use physical paper. Take the breaks. Practice like every detail. What will your snack be in the break? What time will you wake up? What will you do beforehand? Like, this is really your chance to define and rehearse a test day routine. When you then analyze this practice test, 1, focus only on questions that you can do correctly, right? So you're trying to identify untimed. You're trying to identify what could I have done but missed? How can I improve strategy and execution? Ignore things that are just not in your wheelhouse right now. Oh, I never really got good at doing like super hard geometry. Not the time to become obsessed with doing super hard geometry. Rather, make a list of what to not do. This is a test where it is for most people extremely important that you don't try to solve all 40 math questions in full, that you pick your battles. This test really rewards that. I see people bring their quant score up 2-3 points, from 155 to like a 158, 159, just by not trying to do all 20 questions, by saying there's a couple questions that I'm just not going to do. And I'm going to take that time and I'm going to use it to get other things right. That alone can be a super good intervention. So in the second to last week, this is your goal. What are second to last week is about timing, strategy, habit. Eliminating small errors, so lots of short time sets, rehearsing these things again, refreshing things you've studied. You go through your vocab flashcards you've already learned, go through maths facts you've already learned, read back through your notes, collect your big, like all that stuff, second to last week, but no new learning. Then if you have a really strong reason to, maybe one more practice test a week out. If you have a good case for how that will help you, if you feel that might stress you out, derail you, if you're tired, anything that would counterindicate this being in the service of confidence and preparedness and joy, don't do it. But if you do feel like that's the absolute last window, a week out, nothing closer to the date for practice tests. This is just to build confidence. And then in that last week, light review, prioritize rest, relaxation, fun, confidence, mindset. The student that a couple years ago, I had a student who, mostly people's official test scores and practice test scores are in the same realm, right? But I had a student who scored like 4 or 5 points higher on her official test from her last practice test. It was like she went from like 157 to like 162, which is a huge and very difficult corner to turn, but she did it in these last 2 weeks. And when I asked her how, I was like, how have you done this? I need to like bottle the secret and give it to everyone. It was Thanksgiving. She went home. She was with her family, her friends. She ate a lot. She slept a lot. She watched a lot of movies. She didn't really think about the GRE. And then she sat down and took it. The mindset, energy, attention, focus, self-talk, like these things, I cannot overstate their importance. And that's really the biggest stuff that you can do to help yourself in the last 2 weeks, especially in the last week. Don't stress yourself out with a ton of studying. Do take really good care of yourself as a whole person. And do focus on like really building yourself up in that time. Really makes a huge difference. So those are my tips. And if you are like, yes, now I'm just going to go to sleep because I am taking the test really soon. And yes, I hear you that might be the best thing I can do. You're welcome to go do that and use this time for that. If you want to stick around, please stick around. Hopefully I'll have other things that are useful, but that's my timeline for the last 2 weeks. All right. Cool. All right. Let's now talk briefly about the essays. So here are my thoughts on the essays, and then we'll do some reading. Competence, not brilliance. We are aiming for good enough. For business school, that means you are going to aim for a score that is a 4 or higher. It's scored on a scale of 0 to 6. Write as much as you can. Length matters. In the issue essay, which will be the only essay when we switch to the shorter test, in the essay, use at least one concrete specific example to support your points. It can't just all be like hypotheticals. If someone did this, if that, we don't want to be in a situation like that. So think about like books you've read, things you studied in school, things you are obsessed with, like Wikipedia rabbit holes you've been down, like interesting historical facts you've seen. It can even be personal experience, but at least like one of your points needs to be supported by something that is like a real actual thing in the world. That's one of, I think, the skills they're interested in testing. Really like standard intro, 2-body paragraphs, conclusion type structure. And the final thing is just to make sure, do everything the directions want. The directions are not always the same. There's multiple sets of possible directions for each of the essays. So read the essay, read the directions in full, and just do, most directions ask you to do like a main task and a secondary task. Make sure you do that secondary task. So those are my core thoughts on why and how to do the essays. Not why, you have to do them. Those are my core thoughts. I like, one part of my brain's already trying to think about what our reading comp and vocab stuff we're going to do. But those are my core thoughts on the essays. Look at, I would also, I think, read through the sample essays in the official guide. And in particular, like focus on the 4. Aim for a 4. The biggest thing with the essays is just get through them without getting tired so that you're fresh for the scores that follow. Because unless you're applying to like a honestly, I think they just don't count that much anyway. I was going to say, if you're applying for a PhD in the humanities, maybe they do. But I don't think PhDs in the humanities care as much about GRE as, for example, business schools. Cool. Follow-up questions on the essay. you're just aiming for competence, right? You're not aiming, doesn't have to be original thought, doesn't have to be beautiful writing, doesn't have to be, like 7 pages. You don't have to use super esoteric facts in it. Like, I think people sometimes get into trouble because they put more pressure on themselves in the essay than they need to. You just want to get through it with like, I've done what I was supposed to do. I've hit my marks. That. I apologize. I'm gonna have to eat a cough drop because I am recovering from COVID and I'm still coughing a little. So hope the sound isn't too annoying. Will help me save my voice. Okay. Those are my thoughts on essays. Let's talk now about, we're going to talk about inference, actually. I want to talk about reading comp inference. Then we'll talk about vocab because I think that these things are a little bit related. So let me just pull up some slides. You should also do at least one practice test with the essays. I think that's also important. So one of the things for folks who are maybe new to the GRE, something you will discover about the GRE is that it is uses its own language. So there is a type of question that we call inference. This is a reading comp question, type of question. And these questions on the surface, they use the word infer, which makes us think that we need to take some facts and add some other facts from our own brain and produce some kind of result. This is not what the GRE means. When you see the word infer on the GRE, it is always asking, given facts in this text, what other fact would you prove? So when I see infer, I mentally replace it with the word prove. When we talk about vocabulary questions, so the reason I'm like, I'm going to start with inference and then I'm going to talk about vocab is when we start with vocabulary questions also use the same idea. The correct answer is the one that I can support strongly with clues from the text. So if whether it is an inference question or a vocab question, this is really key for improving at vocab questions too. You always want to be able to point back to the text and say, this is how I justify my answer, right? Like, this is how I prove that this answer is correct. So for example, let's say this is our fact. Louisa came running into the room with her hair soaking wet. I want everyone chat in the chat. Tell us. What other facts can you prove? Like, what could I, in GRE terms, quote unquote, infer from this? Cool. I like it. People are getting it. What can I infer from this? She was outside the room. She entered the room. Her hair is not dry. That's pretty much it. So what you don't want to do, the trap that the GRE is always, the trap is to introduce information, right? Something like it's raining, she took a shower. We don't want to go for things that seem like possible, but I can't prove. That is the trap in GRE inference. So anything if you're ever like, yeah, that could be true, that's probably not the correct answer to an inference question. We need things that we prove. However, it's not always straightforward, right? Like it's not always like the passage says it and then the answer clearly says exactly the same thing. As anyone who studied knows, the inference is a lot trickier than that. So I want to talk now about what is, now that we sort of know, okay, this is what's allowed as a rule in an inference question, how do we go from passage text to correct inference answer? And I want to look at a really simple example. I'm going to give us a couple minutes for this. We have here two sentences, like the shortest passage imaginable, two sentences, and 4 statements. Now, more than one of these statements could be a legal inference. You're allowed to pick more than one for this. You can pick more than one. I just would like you to chat me which of these 4 statements is an allowable inference. I'll give us a little time to think about it, and I will go off camera so you can think without feeling like I'm staring at you, and we will discuss in a moment. Love it. A lot of us are doing great. So I think everyone agrees 1 is correct. If gas has steadily increased, has gone up, means that it was lower. This is, there I think are 3 patterns for how passage text and correct answer relate. This is the pattern that I think of as the flip. You know, her hair was wet. It was not dry. Like that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the flip. We see that a lot. So this is correct. 2 is a trap. 2, no one picked 2, right? Because this is possible, but not provable. So 2 is not an allowable inference. Number 3 is also an allowable inference. Number 3 is also correct. This was the one we had a little more dissent or disagreement about. Why is 3 correct? Well, I know that the price has increased, and I also know that the quantity has increased. So if I'm selling more gallons and each gallon costs more, there's going to be an increase in overall money spent. This is my second pattern. This is the pattern that I think of as, very elegantly, combine 2 facts. So again, in inference, the correct answer may at first glance look different from the passage. It takes a moment's more thought to see what the relationship is, but we tend again to have one of these patterns. We take a fact and we flip it. We combine 2 facts. Or the third pattern, which is not on this screen because it is the simplest one, is we rephrase a fact. So same idea, different words. Flip, combine 2 facts, rephrase. I think every inference question that I've seen can fit into roughly into one of these 3 categories. I'll talk a little bit about like that kind of stuff too in a sec when I talk about how to get better. Number 4 is not true. We can never prove anything about the future, right? And this is where we get a little existential. Like we don't know anything about the future. So can't ever prove future statements. Soon as they see will continue, will this, will that, I know that can't possibly be the right answer. That's a quick elimination. So these are the guidelines for making decisions within reading comp inference. We have to be able to prove it, but we need to allow for a little adjusting. So do we flip a fact? Do we combine 2 facts? Or do we rephrase or restate a fact? We have to be, like 99% confident, though, that we can prove that answer. The bar is pretty high. However, it's the GRE, so I think that this sometimes feels a little tricky. So over time, I think you want to repeat enough inference questions on your own so that you kind of internalize the sense of like some correct inference is very close to the passage, some's a little further away. And I think it's through repeated practice and reflection that we get a sense of that like allowable small band of correct answer. So I think that is helpful. So I want to now talk about how to get better at reading comp, how to get better at verbal. And then I will talk, hopefully, we'll see how we're doing for time. Yeah, I think we're going to have a good amount of time. Hopefully we will have time to also talk a little bit about vocal questions. How to get better at verbal. 1, here's my process for studying a passage. If I'm going to do like a GRE passage, and then I'll also talk about like more existentially ways to improve at reading. 1, do the passage and questions. If you're new, untimed. If you've been at it a while, you can do this timed. 2 minutes per question, but that also has to include reading the passage. 2, review each question. If you got it right, I want you to analyze the wrong answers. Why are they wrong? Why would they trick someone? Can you develop categories for wrong answer? Because the GRE uses the same types of tricks over and over again. The same trick that you see in an easy problem, it's just a more sophisticated version of that trick in a hard problem. So if you can spot these tricks and these patterns in questions that you can do, it's going to help you scale up to things more difficult. So I always review questions I get right. There's always something still to learn from reviewing them. Just because you've done it, gotten it right, doesn't mean you have finished extracting the value, right? You've spent the time doing the question, so like learn the most you can from it. If you got it wrong, why? Why is the right answer better? How would you adjust how should you adjust? You know, what specific like habit, process, etc. can you add in? And then go back and reflect on your read of the passage and your notes. What could be improved? Oh yeah, I spent way too much time in the first paragraph, or, oh yeah, my notes were too detailed, or I took no notes, or I drifted off, or whatever it is. Commit to one change the next time you do it, then do the next passage either later that day or, right away, or the next day. Whenever you do your next passage, implement that one change. So quality of review. This is especially people starting out. I like, please take this to heart. Quality of review matters more than quantity. There is some volume is important, right? We want to see enough questions that we sort of understand the major patterns of the test and feel comfortable and confident. Volume matters, but how you learn from what you do matters a whole lot more. How you review those problems. Reviewing like this, it takes a little effort. It takes a little initiative. It doesn't feel as, I think, as like comfortable or satisfying as just like doing questions quickly in sequence. But the things that feel good when we study are usually not, unfortunately, not the things that help us. Like done right, studying will feel a little difficult, a little frustrating, a little stressful. That's okay. Really frustrating, really stressful, not okay. Don't want it to be miserable, but it should feel effortful. If it does, you need that friction somewhere. So commit to one change, do the next passage with that one change. Did it help? Great. Now think of a new habit to add. A lot of improving at this test is habit acquisition, right? So like one little change, practice that change, solidify that change, make the next change. Even if there's 50 things you want to improve, one adjustment at a time in sequence is going to add up. Also why folks who are new, consistency matters more, is more important than intensity. It is way more effective to show up for 20 minutes a day than it is to show up for 2 hours on Saturday. Consistency is hard, but this is, I think more and more, I think the secret to changing anything in your life is to like do it daily. Even if it's 5 minutes a day. If you're just starting out, just commit to do 5 minutes of GRE a day for the next week. Then you can do 10 the week after that, 15 the week after that. You'll have a lot more success and a lot more happiness, I think, approaching that. Cool. Other big thing that I really strongly advise for improving at verbal, read more slowly. Read at the speed you need to read at to comfortably comprehend. This is the biggest mistake all of us make. We all do this. We all try to read faster than we can read. We do this when we read on a screen. Anyone reading on a screen, you are trying to read faster than you should be. It's why we don't retain information from screens the way we do from printed material. If you're studying and you're trying to like learn a concept, printed material. But GRE, we have to take on a screen. It's one of the bummers of the test. So know that you are going to be trying to read too fast. And that's maybe what will sometimes makes verbal feel particularly stressful and exhausting, is we're trying to process information at a speed our brain is not equipped to process that information at. So read at the pace that you need to read at to comfortably comprehend. Each of us will be a little bit different, but it will feel slow. You will feel like you are having to slow yourself down. If it feels slow, it's probably right. I have, again, seen people make big 5-point jumps in verbal simply by practicing this idea, taking more time in the reading itself. If you read slower, the questions will go faster. So keep in mind, I'm never aiming to understand. Like when I read a GRE passage, I'm not trying to 100% understand every sentence perfectly. I'm aiming to understand about 40 to 50% of the passage. But of the 40 to 50% that I want to understand, I need to read at the speed I need to read at to understand that. Then you can make up the time by being more efficient in the question. So no matter what your natural reading speed is, there is a strategy that will work for you. I promise. I think, the objection to this is like, oh, I'm going to run out of time. Even if you are someone who tends to be like a more meticulous and slower reader, there are absolutely ways to make that work by getting really fast and efficient and clever in the questions. So those are my big thoughts on reading. Final thoughts on how to improve it verbal, and then I'll talk a little bit about vocab questions specifically. Outside of, if you want to acquire a lot of vocabulary words, Google something called a Lightner box. I probably don't have time to walk through this today. It will probably take me a long time, and I don't think everyone needs it. But if you are very serious about like really acquiring a lot of words, this is the way to do it. This is like the gold standard for learning any facts you want to learn. It takes some discipline. I've had 2 students do it successfully in the last 8 years, so it's not easy, but those 2 students like really profoundly changed their vocabulary. So if you're worried about acquiring vocabulary, I think the good news is that the GRE does seem to be trending toward more like accessible, more like common use words. I think it's moving away from the really esoteric stuff, but still some really hard words on there for sure. If you know that this is something that you're going to be concerned about, look up a Lightner box, make it for your vocab. It is the way to do this well. There's some apps that use this idea, like Anki is one, so you can make your own flashcards, but make your own flashcards too. Again, if you really like, I need to get after the vocab. I think the other skill that is really important if you're thinking about just building general proficiency, read as much as you can. And I would target, places like the New Yorker and the Atlantic and, like these kind of like, I don't know what the word for them is, but these like kind of American magazines that like write, they're not scholarly journals, but they write it in a somewhat more academic-y English a lot of the time. The New Yorker still uses like the little umlaut, very fussy. Yeah. I'm gonna put it on Kia because we've gotten an endorsement. So if you prefer the digital, that's a good way to use that. Read Scientific American, read as much as you can. Doesn't have to be GRE stuff, but read topics that you like and topics you don't like, mix them up. The other thing that I highly recommend is read 19th century novels in English. Because they have really complex sentence structure and esoteric vocabulary. So like, I'm convinced that that's what helps me with standardized tests, is that I'm an English literature person and have read old English literature for my whole life. And so I think that helps me a lot because I have like a comfort with like really weird sentence structures, and we see a lot of really weird and frankly like not good sentence structures on the GRE. So that's my weird tip for how to improve, and the vocabulary too. Or like 20th century authors who have very strong style, like someone like Nabokov, someone like Toni Morrison has a really strong style. There's tons of good people, but literary fiction, not a bad choice for GRE prep. All right, those are my tips. Let's talk a little bit about vocab questions. So I can do everybody's questions. Here we go. So just for folks who are new to see, there's two types of what we call vocabulary question. There's text completion, where we have 1, 2, or 3 blanks, and we pick one word to go in that blank, complete the sentence. Now, I think the really, really important thing, fill in the blank in the way that best completes the text. These are about meaning and critical reading as much, if not more, than knowing the words. Obviously, knowing the words is important. You can, however, work around, if I don't know 1 or even 2 words in the answer choices, I can still often get to the correct answers. So we can work around unknown words. But I think it's just really important to remember these are still reading questions. We are still in this inference world of like, let's find the context clues and think about how they shape the meaning of this sentence. So this is text completion. Do not do these by ear. If you are routinely doing these by picking what sounds good, you may be fine with like easy. I see this a lot actually with people who are strong in verbal, where easy, medium vocab questions, they're killing them, they're great. They're doing it just by intuition, by ear, just makes sense. But then the hard stuff trips them up. So even if you can do the easier stuff by ear, learn a structured process for them and practice that with the easier questions, because you will need it for the harder ones. I promise. So that's often a tip for improving, is to like come back to make sure to a process that is very structured and approaching these. The other type of vocab question is called sentence equivalence. This is where we have 1 blank, we pick 2 words. So we are picking both words that fit the context clues in the sentence, and we are looking to produce like 2 identical versions of that sentence. So we need words that in this context match each other. Yes, great point that the 3 blank text completion is particularly hard. I often advise, especially if someone is concerned about timing and verbal, I'll advise people to guess and mark those and do them last. Because they're like, you have to get all 3 blanks right to get credit. They're like the least bang for your buck. They take more time and they're worth the same amount as any other question. So, good timing hack is just to leave the 3 blank text completion for last. All right, so this is not a legal GRE question, right? This is not a legal GRE question. Why? Why could this not be a question that the GRE could ask us? It looks like a text completion. We have 1 blank, we have 5 choices, but this is not an okay question. Why? Yeah, we do not have any clues. We have to have those clues that can narrow us down to 1 provably best answer. So now we can fix it. We add a clue. Complaint. He's eaten 10 pieces of pie. So now I have evidence and I can say, okay, hurting is better, because the most obvious result, the straightest line from someone complaining is that something's wrong. And we know his stomach's not empty because he's just eaten 10 pieces of pie. So I can rule out empty or cold for that reason. Has to do with eating too much and complaining something's wrong. So this is the most important thing. Make sure that you are finding clues in the sentence before looking at the answer choices, because 4 of those answer choices are there to mess you up. So I always try to analyze the sentence a little bit first before I go to my answer choices, as much as I can. Some questions I have to go to the answer choices early on, but as much as I can in verbal, this is true in reading too, I delay going to the answers until I have some clue what's happening. Otherwise, I'm going to get my head spun around, especially in reading all those long answers. We'll need to have some focus before I look at them. So I think about, what does the blank describe? Okay, the blank describes the boy's stomach. What else describes that thing? And what directional clues do I have in the sentence? Like reversals, contrast, those kinds of things. Thus, on the other hand, stuff like that. So I read the sentence and I ask myself, what does the blank describe? What else describes that thing? How do the pieces of the sentence fit together? What are my directional clues? For example, to walk you through a simple example. What does the blank describe? It describes this sentence. What else describes that? Is simple. What are my reversal words? It is not and because. So it is simple, therefore it is not complex. Yeah, I love it. So I have my fill-in, and as you were studying, write down your fill-ins, right? Physically cover up those answers with a piece of paper and write down your fill-in, because this is going to help you analyze, are you missing these because you don't know the words, or are you missing these because the sentences are tricking you? And I think sometimes we have a nice surprise that like, oh, actually, I just need to learn some techniques for the sentences. It's maybe not that I just need to learn a million words. Maybe I don't have to learn a million words if I get better at the reading part of things. Cool. Now I match. Clear is the opposite, so I get rid of that. And I will always, this is another little thing that I think makes a big difference. In verbal, I always write down A, B, C, D, E, and then I cross them off as I go. Clear, not the same as complex. Ugly, not the same as complex. Confusing, maybe. Convoluted, I don't know what that is. And long, definitely long and complex, not the same. All right, so I want to model now. How do I make a good decision if I don't know all the words? If you do know convoluted, bear with me, we'll get there. I would start by making a good choice about what I did know. Confusing. Is confusing the same as complex? Could something be simple and confusing? Yeah, actually, I think something could be simple and confusing. Something could be complex but clear. It could be really complex but really well made and not confusing. So confusing and complex are not the same. And that's my test. If I know it's this, is it also that? If I know it's complex, is it also confusing? Not necessarily. So I get rid of confusing. And then I am willing, because I've made a good decision to eliminate the word I knew and to trust my read of the sentence, I pick the word I don't know. Convoluted does mean like winding, meandering. Like I always think of a stream that kind of folds in on itself a lot. Like if you see those aerial views of rivers, a maze, a twisty old street. So convoluted and complex are the closest match of everything here. And D is our correct answer. So I think my tips for vocab I can sum up as work on the sentence reading. And same as with reading comp, there are patterns. Look for patterns in wrong answers here too. And I think that can also be enormously helpful, right? Like, you know, they usually have something like confusing that's sort of in the realm, but adds information, adds assumption, adds things that aren't provable, goes a little beyond provable. That's something we'll see in inference questions too. So learning those patterns again can be helpful. I like that we asked specifically about vocab and inference because they really are the same skill in a lot of ways, just different formats for testing that skill. Cool. All right. I think that I got, you know, one last thing I'll say, just going back to reading, I got a question about how to read faster. It's not so much reading faster, it's learning where to focus your attention, like what parts of the passages you do want to focus on and where you can kind of skim or skip over things. And that I think is where this step here becomes really, really important. You know, okay, I see now to answer the questions correctly, I really just needed to read like the first and last sentences of each paragraph. And that gives me enough framework. So that's where I think less about reading faster and more about like allocating my attention effectively within the passage. That helps. Suraj, I cannot answer that question. It's not really an answerable question. The answer is truly just like as many as you can do in the time that you have. Maximum words that you can learn per week is 50 words. And that will take you 4 to 5 hours to do. So, with vocab, I think there is no real like definable goal. It's really just like doing the best you can in the time you have, and then also learning techniques for working around words you don't know. So like improving the odds that you'll know as many words as possible, working on techniques for that. I would, there's, yeah, I think 1,000 is probably like a good goal. No, ETS has not yet provided new short practice tests. However, Manhattan Prep short practice tests are up. So we have some short versions you can take. ETS is saying that they will have practices in September. September is soon. I don't yet know when in September. All right. Thank you all. Thank you for your awesome questions. I hope, again, that there was something of use for everyone in here. I will be back in September doing another one of these. I'm also thinking I may start doing like some drop-in Q&A sessions on like a weekly basis, which I haven't quite figured out yet. But if anyone has follow-up that they want, specific questions to your situation, you can email me. I also write a newsletter, and I have all kinds of fun things in there, but it's based on tarot. I also do tarot readings, so I draw tarot cards and write about them in relation to the GRE and about study skills and problems and things like that. So I've been on a hiatus from it because I've had a busy summer, but I'm getting back into it this week. So if that appeals to you, that's my other free resource. And then these free prep hours are all recorded and they go on YouTube. And if you go to our YouTube channel, Manhattan Prep GRE, there's so much good free material on there. Like you can find any topic. One of us has taught a session on it. Probably more than one of us has taught a session on it. So there's some, I know there's some in there specifically like about reading comp inference that you might want to track down to get like more practice problems, more of a deep dive. Cool. Yay. Thank you for being here. You are also welcome, and best of luck, especially for folks taking the test soon. Fingers crossed you get the score you want to get and you can beat it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I haven't figured it out yet, but if you're interested in it, maybe sign up for the newsletter and I will have information about it there. Yeah. Have a good night, everyone.